Hello, everyone. Good morning, and welcome to another exit interview for DCP All Stars Rites of Passage. I'm one of the hosts, Ian Moorhead, joined by one of my co hosts, Alex Trias. Alex, how are you this morning?
I'm tired, but I'm always tired. These games, it's not just tiring for the players, it's tired for production too. But I'm very excited to be here talking with Michael Zucker.
Yeah, and Michael Zucker, our fourth place finisher, returning from Survivor Exile Island. Zucker, how are you this morning?
I'm good. I'm excited to rehash and talk about the game and my experience. And yeah, I'm just ready to go.
All right, and then our last person here, as always, is Lilly, the queen of the edge sets. Lilly, how are you today?
I am good. I'm ready to crack into it.
Okay, crack away.
All right. So we're probably going to talk a lot about merge from merge on, right? But a couple pre-merge questions, because we can't get it all in the episodes, or else they would be super, super long. But in the first episode, we see both, or maybe the second episode, we see both Austins are voted out and swapped. How did this change your game? Because you were on exile with Moorhead, and now you have Garsow. What were your thoughts about that and having to vote out Austin that first vote?
Yeah, so I think we all probably had similar mindset, especially just having just started the game and not really having much time, right after the individual challenge, for each tribe to basically come to not just a vote, but just like getting to know people. So I think we all had the same mindset of just as long as it's not us, like we'll live with the result and we'll work from there. So yeah, like on one hand, I had a connection with Austin from, my original season, but I also wouldn't say it was like a super strong connection, like we were on the same tribe that season to start with, but then we kind of got swapped and separated and never really linked back up come merge. So I wasn't, really like pushing for him to stay. I didn't want to stick my neck out and try and have people think, oh, maybe there's some kind of, exile thing going on. So on one hand, I felt it may have been to my advantage for him to have been voted out to kind of separate myself from that thought process, but also just to not seem like I'm really pushing for something so early on. That was kind of my strategy last game. I wanted to kind of implement this game just to kind of lay low a little bit early on, just kind of get my footing and kind of develop relationships accordingly from there.
Yeah, and you mentioned, I guess we're going to hop forward a little bit, right? You mentioned exile, and we do see the exile boys or men come together at the merge. Do you think that voting out Austin in this first round kind of gave you a little bit of a fog to hide behind because people aren't worried that you're going to be with them because you're willing to vote them out? So do you think that that helped in the long run?
Yeah, I think in hindsight, especially, I think it did. I tried to have obviously like somewhat of a game plan, but also be flexible, just be adaptable to any and all situations. Cause I know, there was likely at that point to start the game, going to be some swaps, going to be some twists that just put a wrinkle in whatever plans you have to start with. So I wanted to leave that option open, in the event we merge and there's at least a couple more of my exile, players still in the game to possibly form something there, but also to form relationships outside that in the event that, many of us are not at the merge, then, I have another group to work with. But yeah, to answer your question, I think that having voted Austin out showed, people I'm not, just, loyal to who I played with and I'm willing to work with new groups of people. So I think it did help my game in the long run.
Yeah, and you mentioned relationships. I mean, having played with you, you're very good at making relationships. People always have good things to say about you, which makes it very hard to vote you out of the game, which is a huge strength of yours. And we see you make strong connections with a couple people, but just wondering, going through pre-merge, through your initial tribe and through your swap, who were you feeling you were getting closer to and you were hoping to work with closely come the merge?
Yeah, so just going back to like the early days of the game, I really had a good, I mean everyone did, but had a good connection with Lex. We just had good game and outside the game talks. And from there, I had some good individual talks with Shea, with Ashley, and with Sarah. So, from my perspective, we kind of had within the to start the 9-person tribe, that group of 5. But there certainly, different kind of, and everyone had different, thoughts of who their number 1, number 2 were. So, but I felt that to try and differ a little bit of how I played the first game, ultimately what was my downfall was kind of being perceived as too close with John. So I wanted to try and obviously have close relationships with people, but not so close that come a time, whether it be pre-merge or post-merge, that they would, try and go for, the big target, but instead of going for the big target, go for someone like me. So I wanted to have somewhat of a looser relationship, alliance with people where, again, in the event that someone within that group is targeted and voted out, I can pivot to, other groups that I've, kind of kept some tabs with. So that was kind of the main overarching difference in my game this round, was I wanted to just have those alliances, but not be so tightly linked, and limit my options. So that way, people look at me as a threat just by virtue of how close I am with people.
Mhm.
Well, I think that worked out because we hear throughout like the episodes, and even some people during their exits, of like back when they put themselves back into the mindset of the game, they're like, I had no clue where Michael Zucker's head was at. Like, I don't know who he's like his closest people are. Like, they may have had an assumption that it was a Shea and an Ashley, but then they're gone immediately. So then after that, it's like they're like, where is his loyalty at? Like, we don't know where
Right.
his head's at. So I think you did a good job there, because I definitely felt like I thought you were going to get some PTSD moments when we get to the merge, shit's hitting the fan. You have like the 2 big names of Kylie and Lex, like, are the names that are out there, and I feel like you must have, like, in the back of your mind been like, oh my god, if all the votes just end up on me somehow again because I'm not the big name.
Right. Yeah. So that was obviously just fast forwarding to that. I mean, I know we'll get more into it, but because at that point I had just gotten, the merge idol. So, I had that bit of paranoia, like, should I just play it just to be safe, just to get through this vote and kind of pick up the pieces after? Or do I trust, the conversations I've had with people and, try and do something with that idol later on in the game? So that was my thought process, especially for those first, essentially handful of merge votes, was just, do I play it? Do I not play it? Do I trust who I talk to? Do I not? And it became increasingly more difficult to make that decision. But, again, I think until I played it, it had worked out that way with that mentality.
Yeah, I mean, and let's get into the merge, right? It created chaos. You are kind of in the, like, we hear your name in it, but not from a lot of people, right? So how do you take your strategy of not being too close with people and this huge blow up? How do you navigate it? And I guess, what are your thoughts on the whole commotion of it?
Yeah. So, I mean, it was so crazy just because we went from a week of playing the long game format, which is, just what I was used to in my previous season, just that pace of the game, even though it was still a much faster pace because it was condensed into a week for, the whole pre-merge. And then we had that time where, right the night before, the mini format started, where, I'm trying to have conversations with people I haven't yet had in the game, like Simmons and Maddie, and just, different, and even people who I'd started the game with, like Lex, who I had been separated for a few days at least prior. So it was just trying to reform relationships, just kind of touch base with people who I hadn't yet had a chance to talk to. So it was chaos. And then, I went to bed, and, I didn't think there was really anything crazy, but I come to wake up to this just complete shit show, where supposedly, again, I failed this test from Lex, and, then, he had mentioned that, if I'm remembering correctly, mentioned it to Kylie, and then Kylie came to me and said, Lex is wanting to go for you, maybe not this round, but the next round. And, it was just so much was going on. And then we were in a group, and I remember I was messaging with Shea, And, I was just, because at that point I felt closest with Shea and with Ashley, just having played with them for the whole game at that point. So I was honest with him and I basically said, yeah, like I'm in this group, but like, there's nothing, as of now going on, I'll let you know if I hear anything. But then he goes right to Lex, I believe Lex about it. And yeah, it was just, and then it came back to within the group that someone within this group basically said they're in the group. And yeah, I mean, you can't make this up. So once all that happened, I was just like, all right, I have to just try and like not freak out, just stay calm, because I think if I were to have freaked out anymore, it would have just been, like hand painted red, I'm guilty, hands in the cookie jar. So I had to just really play it cool. And I think I did a good job, all things considered. And I also felt like, what, if I can just keep saying, no, I didn't do it, eventually maybe people will believe it. So I just had to keep up the facade, keep up the lie. And I think there was like a couple points later on in the game where I think Karen may have mentioned, I think, I don't know if it was Zucker who was the leak. I think maybe it was, someone or someone else. So
Mm-hmm.
I think to a degree it helped, it worked. But yeah, it was definitely I put myself in a bit of a precarious situation, but I think the way in which I handled it and handled myself was not to toot my own horn, but it was impressive. I think I did a good job with that, and ingratiating myself then once the dust settled into different groups to get myself further in the game.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the self tooting of the own horn or whatever is valid. I mean, and totally true, because we see at merge, I mean, we've talked to Kylie, we've talked to Karen, and both of them were like, we wanted Zucker out from the merge, right? Karen is more because she didn't have a connection with you. She's like, you're not in the good, Karen boat, so Zucker's got to go. Kylie with all of the merge stuff, but we don't really hear your name a lot, and we see Kylie go, we see Karen go, and I think the way that you handled the merge and the scrambles is really to do with that. I didn't know if you had any other thoughts of maybe different connections also helped, I don't know what the word is, like protect you, I guess, from your name coming out. What do you think really helped that going through the mini days?
Yeah, so I think that just obviously then I, after the first couple votes, kind of was thinking more of my exile, alliance members, just, because at that point we weren't quite with the majority of numbers, but we just knew we had to still, just make sure it wasn't one of us. And after the first few votes of it being, Lex, then Shea and Ashley, I think also it helped me because again, I been in close groups with those people at various points of the game. And I think the way in which at least I handled them going out, like I tried to not like pander to the jury, but I tried to like be as leave the best taste in their mouth as they could going out of the game. So like I remember I told Shea, right before I said, listen, it's you, there's nothing I can do, but I just wanted to be honest with you. If there's something you got from, your time in exile, play it. Like I wanted to just again leave that good taste in their mouth. So in the event I were to make it to the end, maybe that would maybe not be the reason they vote for me, but at least not hurt my case with them. So I think once I had those first few people on the jury, I was like, okay, let me work the exile thing. Let me link up with Andrew. I had worked very closely with Andrew post swap, and had obviously previous relationship with Simmons and with Austin. So, and then obviously knowing that Maddie was in with them, I said, okay, that's a 5. If we can basically now just ride it to the end, I'm good. And we'll get a little more into it come final 6 and the very end game. But I had my own thoughts of at that point not necessarily wanting to go to the end with all exile, wanting to kind of pivot a little bit and make some end game moves that would paint a target on me. But at that point it's the end of the game, so there's very little chance for people to kind of retaliate against me then. So I wanted to make moves, just not so early, where I'm targeted, early in the merge and I'm on the jury. So it didn't quite obviously work out the way I had hoped, but, fairly well just to get myself to the final 4.
Yeah, and I mean let's go into it, right? I think that your plan of not being fully exile is a great plan. How if you could have changed the order of everything to get your perfect final three, how would that have looked, and where would, I guess, the vote out start to look a little different than what we do see in the game?
I think it comes down to just, the final six vote, right? I had, for my estimation, I was just hopeful that my idol was the only advantage in the game at that point. So assuming that, Garsow didn't have the legacy or didn't will it to Karen, or just if that's just not in the equation, then, as the votes had highlighted, Karen would have been the one to go, which would have been good for me because I didn't feel I was in her end game plan. I don't think she would have been in mine. Just, I know, you never know, but having been a previous winner, it's certainly something she can claim that no one else could within the game if she got to the end. And I just didn't want to, create that scenario. So assuming then it's, myself, Simmons, Austin, Maddie, and now Andrew. I don't know. Like, I always, for some reason, like, I wound up obviously winning the final five immunity, but even before then, I just had this thing in the back of my mind, like, I just feel like I'm going to win the final five immunity. It just was a gut feeling. So I thought, okay, well, if I still have my idol then and I win immunity, I'm not going to just pocket it and not play it. I want to use it to my advantage to, again, be that signature move this season. So I perceived at that point that, the three of Simmons, Austin, and Maddie would have, just by default have voted for Andrew. I would have had a one-on-one conversation with Andrew, basically saying, listen, I don't know where, they're ultimately voting, but I would assume it's probably you. I don't want you to go. I have an idol, which I've held on to since merge. No one knows about. I'm going to play it on you. I want us to vote Simmons and get the next biggest threat out of the game. And I think that would have been, kind of like if you go back to like Survivor San Juan del Sur, where Natalie approaches Jacqueline with kind of the same mentality of, vote the way, I told you to vote and get the biggest target out. That is kind of what I was envisioning if all the pieces of all the cards, fell that way. And then from there, yeah, the target would have been on me at Final Four, but I would have hoped that by, really doing something to help Andrew, he would have been with me at the very least to maybe have a tie vote situation. But also, perhaps from Austin and Maddie's standpoint, still viewing Andrew as a big social threat and a big threat to, talk his way to a victory at the end. So I felt like that situation would have given me the most possibilities to make it to Final Three. So that would have been my ideal had chips fell that way.
See, I love hearing your end game plans. And this is exactly why you were such an easy person for us to pick for this All-Stars cast, because we saw your exile game. Like, we saw the potential that was bubbling and like what you were about to do if a bad plan wasn't created. But I will be very blunt about it. It was a bad plan. But seeing your end game there, let's say you didn't play your idol though at 6 and you survived the wheel against Andrew. So now instead of Andrew, it's Karen. Would you have done that same plan, all else staying the same with Karen though? Knowing that there's like, because like, what do you balance, like Karen's jury threat or the threat of being 3 against 1?
I know, it's very interesting. I think, and that was ultimately because, the main difference was in Final Five, I just now didn't have my idol. So, I really had a debate internally of, okay, do I, go for maybe a Karen or do I go for a Simmons? I felt, because you don't know what the Final Four immunity is, right? So you could base it off, the challenges within the season or from previous seasons. But I felt in the event that I didn't win Final Four, if I had to have either Simmons or Karen win that challenge instead, I would have rather it have been Simmons. Just because I felt like there was a little more possibility for maneuvering to get myself to, come to the Final Three in that scenario versus Karen, which I feel like just with everything that happened at that point in the game, she just was not a fan of me. And I just think if nothing else would have just said, you know what, this is like, my retaliation for that. So I feel like I would have liked to have thought objectively and said, yes, I would have used that idol in the same way for Karen. But I don't know what I would have done. I didn't have really the chance to think of that because it just wasn't the reality. So in hindsight, I would have liked to have think I would have, but I have to be subjective and say, I wasn't the biggest fan of her in the game. She wasn't the biggest fan of me. So that may have kind of reigned supreme at the time.
I didn't know there's such a big, I mean, not that like I just didn't know there was such a big rivalry between you two.
I wouldn't call it a rivalry. I just think that like going back to that talk where kind of like the leak happened and the shit hit the fan come merge. Karen was just very quick to just be like, Zucker, I think it was you. Like just basically like calling me out in public and had no qualms about it. So I just again, whether it be that or just everything that transpired, just never really, saw eye to eye in the game. So yeah, that was kind of the extent of it. It wasn't anything personal, like, about outside the game stuff. It was just in the game. That's how things happened.
Sounds like Yankees Red Sox.
Oh
rival.
yeah. Classic Yankee Red Sox mid
Yeah.
2000 rivalry right there.
Or for him being a Mets fan and Mets Phillies.
Yeah.
Or
yeah,
Mets
that's true.
Braves. Or really Mets versus a lot of people. A lot of people don't like the Mets recently. So
Well, right now I don't like them because they're playing like crap, but that's besides the point.
I do have a question though, because we don't like we talk about the idol, we talk about the holding of the idol, the balls of steel, the like keep waiting, and you play it. I want to talk about when you got it.
Yes.
How surprised were you? Because I know I was that you were able to like not just get it very last moment. Only person who maybe has a clue about it is Lex, and
Yep.
Lex immediately goes like, what were you thinking throughout that tribal council? Because like you had the answer. You had the answer
Yes.
there. I like gave so many opportunities for everybody throughout tribal council to answer to just ask for a hug. I left an open-ended question at the very beginning. No one takes it. I ask everyone a question. No one takes it. And then I'm literally about to stop and everyone from talking so that we can vote. And you just ask for that hug. Like, what was
Yeah.
going through your mind at tribal?
Well, I mean, I'll just go back like a little bit, just like throughout the pre-merge, just, us getting the clues in tree mail. Like I felt like of all the, twists of all the, kind of clues that were presented to us to solve, that group of clues, I just felt kind of like how I had the intuition of like, I'm going to win Final Five. I just felt internally, I'm going to solve this. I didn't know when or how, but I was just like, I feel like this is mine. So I was really adamant about just like, being as diligent with that as possible, just not missing clues, just really just taking good notes for it and being attentive because I had learned from, again, my first season that there's various times where, the host names may change to something else. So I just have to be on the lookout for that. So as soon as I saw that, because I was like, okay, well, what's question mark? Did I miss something? And then I saw a question mark equals hug. And I'm like, that's it. So now I just have to, I have the clue. I just need to now say it. But the question was how and at what point do I say it? So I know you came out with the open-ended question right away. I thought, well, if I just come right out with that, it's going to look a little suspicious. So I had to kind of roll the dice of not being too eager, too anxious to just go out and grab it, but also, not wait so long where now someone can just take it from me, not from me, but just take it, and now it's not mine. So yeah, so I just kind of like was just being again adaptable to tribal and just seeing how the conversation went. And I knew come right before the votes I had to go for it. So as soon as Lex said his, I know it was like a random mix of words. He said things because I think he thought, it's gonna be me, so let me just go for broke here. So when he didn't get it, I was like, all right, now I gotta go for it. But I just have to do it in a way that is again as low key and unsuspecting as possible. So I was just trying to play it off like a joke, like, hey, Alex, can I have a hug? Like I sure could use one right now, and trying to get people to laugh it off. And I think it did a good job because as far as I'm aware, I don't think anyone knew I had an idol throughout the post merge. So, and I didn't tell anyone, but if someone were to have in hindsight solved the clue and realized, oh, that's what it was. Now I know Zucker has it. I don't think anyone did figure that out. So I think I did a good job of playing it off like it was just a joke, but it was obviously for a reason.
I will say you are lucky that no one else asked for the hug during tribal council, because some people were trying to ask for it during the challenges, and I was saying nothing for you. But if like you did that and then Kylie just in the last grasp also asked for a hug, I would have told them, sorry, no hugs left.
Yeah,
Like,
no,
I was like, I have the setup to help play along with you, allow you to like have some sense of like deniability. But if
yeah.
anyone else has, I'm like, you're on your own, kid.
Yeah, exactly. No, it worked out, I think, as well as I could have hoped for, and it wasn't obviously ultimately used in the exact way that I wanted, but
Right.
I think having held on to it despite my want and urge to play just for keeping myself safe. I'm proud of the fact that I stuck to my guns and I trusted the relationships I had, and I played it even though I maybe technically didn't have to play it at Final Six. I have no regrets of playing it then because I would not want to leave my chance up to a 50-50, basically flip of the coin. So
Yep.
I'm happy of how it ultimately shook out.
And you should be, because I know I am the stickler of what's a good or ineffective idle play. That is an effective idle play. I am going to confirm it here. I've told everyone in production this. I'm like, due to the impact, like everything that happens in that tribal council, it was obviously the correct play because your option was ensure safety or 50% chance of going home. Like,
yeah. And even if I mean, I don't think anyone anticipated it being obviously an advantage get-in situation, but I knew the majority of the votes were going on Karen. So it was a reactionary move. Like I knew it was very likely she was going to throw her vote on me. So, that was the one wrinkle with the kind of end the scramble, was that I didn't have a chance to really shore up where Andrew was voting, So had I known he was maybe not going to vote Karen, that would have kind of been through my mind as well. But my assumption was just that it's going to be us five voting Karen, and then Karen's one vote is going to dictate who goes home without having any discussion with her or anyone of where her vote might go. I assumed it would have been me. So I felt like I had to play it, because if not, I would have gone home. So yeah, so I'm glad it's looked at, even though it's a technical incorrect play, just a subjective correct play.
yeah.
Well, those were all of my questions. I don't know if either of the hosts have any, or we can go to Facebook.
Yeah, I'm just making sure there's no last minute updates to the questions.
Yeah, I'll ask. How did it feel to watch the Pirates smack the Mets around last night?
I'll be honest, I didn't watch because it's just too hard to watch.
Hey, I've been there this year and we have a better record than you guys somehow, so I get it.
Yeah, well, you guys started off really hot, and
They're heating up again.
Evened out a bit, but still, it just goes to show you could have the highest payroll and it means nothing. You just got to have the players perform, and they're certainly not the Mets. So,
okay. Well, we are now going to go to the Facebook questions. We got some for you, and we are starting off with your exile buddy, your rites of passage buddy. It's Coach Denson. Such a great time running into you again this time around, man. Guess we will have to run it back again one day. Question: you can make a starting rotation with any 5 Mets starting pitchers since 2004. Who do you have?
interesting that he starts with 2004, because obviously you can go back into their history and pick out the Tom Seavers and the Dwight Goodens, but 2004 was kind of the start of not so many good years for the Mets. So this will be a little tough, but I'll give it a go. He said 5, right? Obviously,
yeah.
5. Okay, so I'll kind of view it as how they played with on the Mets versus how they played with before or after, because they at that point had just gotten Pedro and Tom Glavine, who had Hall of Fame careers, but I wouldn't really say their time with the Mets added to that legacy. So thinking through just in order, I'm gonna go with Johan Santana, just because he had great years with the Twins and he had some good years with the Mets. Didn't end quite the way we hoped, but still has, even though it's maybe not technically in hindsight a no-hitter, he still threw the, at the time was the first Mets no-hitter. And, that's something to be said. So I would go with Johan, and I would also go with R.A. Dickey, similar time period. He had his resurgence with the Mets and, was kind of not really thought of as a great pitcher by any means prior to then, but developed his knuckleball and won a Cy Young with them. and had 20 wins in a season and was just probably one of the best, if not the top 3 or so pitchers in the game at the time. So I would go with R.A. Dickey as well. Now we're kind of in like the 2010 Mets, which again wasn't really good aside from 2015. So I would say, well, of course, you got to go with DeGrom, even though unfortunately for him in recent news, he's going to have Tommy John surgery, but I don't think anyone can argue him being the best, if not one of the best pitchers of the game when he's healthy. And he won 2 Cy Youngs with the Mets. So I think he would be probably your top guy in that rotation. Now gets a little tricky just because you have some guys who had big hype, underperformed. I'm going to go with probably like a not so like sexy name, but like a dependable name, probably like either like a Mike Pelfrey or like a John Neese, just someone who you can count on to make like 30 starts a year, not strike out a whole lot, but just, get the outs when you needed them to, eat some innings. So if I had to pick one, I'll go with Mike Pelfrey. Why not? And then speaking of sexy, I'll have to end the list with the big old Bartolo Colon, big sexy himself. If for nothing else, I don't think anyone could view his home run in San Diego as anything more than just an amazing moment, not just for baseball, but just in life. It's just, you don't have to be a baseball fan at all, but you got to love that moment. Even if you're James Shields, who gave up the home run, I don't think you can look at an overweight 42, 43-year-old guy having no business at the plate, let alone hitting a home run. I mean, it was just such a great moment. But on top of that, he was a very reliable, dependable pitcher for the few years he was with the Mets. So that would be my 5 in a long-winded response. So
I love it. No, I was gonna give you a lot of flack if you did not pick Bartolo Colon.
Damn, I really thought Matt Harvey was going to be in there somewhere. That like
same.
Yeah, listen, I
2011 Matt Harvey.
Picture. He was such a big star, but just his light burned so quickly, and he had the couple good years, but then just got hurt and never really was able to come back. So I just feel like he was one of those that had such big hype, but just never quite lived up to those expectations. So I couldn't, in my heart, go with someone like that.
Yeah. So next question though is from Kiley Kelley. Zucker to Slugger. Did you have plans going into merge to try to link up with the Exile boys, or is that just how you felt you needed to pivot when shit hit the fan?
Yeah, so I kind of touched on that earlier. I think it was one of those where it was certainly an option I wanted to leave open. I didn't want to just commit to something and go with that. Like, again, my game was one of adaptability and maneuverability and just being flexible when I needed to. So leaving that door open, but of course, once shit hit the fan and, it was Lex and then Shea and then Ashley that went, I knew, I wanted to pivot to that and ride that for a while. So, it was kind of an intentional thing, but also a thing that just kind of by virtue of what had happened was how I pivoted within the post-merge.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Next question is from Lex. Let me clear my throat first. Benny and Ham, Bracket Boys, the Amanda Fan Club, whatever our title. I'm so glad to have played this game with you. What good times and fun we had. I'm so thankful you came back for this season. Who knew what havoc you would cause from one lying villain to the next? I'm just so proud of you. Now, let's get to the good stuff. I want you to talk about the night of merge. Did you see me in your long-term plans? Would love to hear what was going through your mind when I was first hinting at making a secret code, going into the mini portion with you on night 1. Just a quick disclaimer, as you know, I'm definitely not offended if I wasn't. I still love you, my friend. Just want to hear your thoughts on all those shenanigans.
Great questions. I think in terms of my long-term plan with Lex was not to go to the very end with him. It was certainly, but it was also not to have him go as the first merge vote. I was thinking more of like a mid-merge vote situation because I feel like everyone felt that he's a great shield. He's a social threat, and we would all be stupid to want to have him get to the end. But I feel like he, in a way, kind of like shielded most, if not all of us. And so I certainly wanted to work with him for at least another few rounds within the merge. What was his other question? I'm sorry, after that.
It was mainly that one, but then also to hear your thoughts when he was hinting at you about making a secret code going into the mini.
Yes. So I'll be honest, like I was pretty mentally exhausted at that point, just, going through all the different discussions I had had and just knowing I was getting into a point which was a new experience for me, was the mini format, but that it would be, a very quick, fast-paced thing. So I knew he was hinting at that. I just didn't know how much obviously he knew or didn't know, if it was obviously by coincidence or if it was because he found out somehow. I certainly wasn't the one to tell him, but I also hadn't had a chance to follow up with Shea or Ashley to know what conversations they may have had with him. So I had to kind of, again, like toe that line a little bit of not saying something that would be like incriminating against me, that he could then just go to them and say, oh, Zucker said this and did that. So yeah, I think obviously if I had assumed he was told that already and I just went along with that, it would have appeared I was obviously being very honest and upfront with him. But I just felt like I couldn't risk that, having not had a chance to talk with Shea and Ashley at that point.
Yeah, that makes all the sense in the world. And knowing Lex, he would love that either way. He loves, you gotta love a good villain. And I guess to you, for you, a lot of people viewed you as that in this game.
Yep.
I will say, did you expect that? Did you expect
No,
the reaction to be like,
yeah,
oh my God, Zucker?
And if you want to say like the only time I was honest, I was honest throughout the game. Just, there were various times I wasn't, and I just tried playing it off so innocently that maybe people felt like, oh, it's, not so bad. He didn't mean to do things so badly, but whatever. Point is, I felt like one of the things I said to people was, it really is a game. Like, we should be having fun. We should be enjoying ourselves and, not taking things so seriously. I know we all want to win and do well, but at the end of the day, at least I feel this is just a great experience and just wanting to get as much out of it as possible. So I think, again, anything people have to say in terms of like how they perceive me is all game related. I think outside the game, maybe I'm wrong, but I think I'm very nice and friendly to everyone and get along with everyone. And we can set aside game from outside the game stuff. So yeah, a little surprising just in the game I was viewed that way. But obviously, just given how things had happened, not terribly surprised, just because, I was kind of in the middle of a lot of that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And I realized this next question is from Greg, and I sort of asked this unknowingly. So we did such a good job before that point, Lily. But I'll ask it again, and we can try to get more of a pointed answer, like put your feet to the fire. So Greg asked, say Karen goes home at Final 6 and you still have your idol. Who would you have tried to idol at Final 5? So we were saying before that it was Simmons. So I sort of want to pivot this question to something we didn't mention. It was how you were able to pivot during the early part of the merge, where you did say Simmons' name a few times, and then like Simmons would get in a room with you like, I never said that, but like they kept like trusting you, they kept trusting you all the way to got you the Final 4. Right. How were you able to maneuver that so that you would have been able, in that moment, ideally, you would have successfully blindsided him?
Yeah, so you're saying how would I have handled like in terms of Simmons, like in that situation? So I think the thought would have been, yeah, if I had gone with that scenario, I have my idol at 5, I tell Andrew, I'm playing it on you. Doesn't matter what the other 3 do, we control the vote because we're both safe. So I would have trusted Andrew not to go to Simmons to say that. But even if he had, what would Simmons have done, right? There was nothing that would have negated that idol, so I still would have played on Andrew. And even if Andrew, let's say, if he wanted to really shake up the game, if he still wanted Simmons in for some reason and he threw his vote on, let's say, Austin or Maddie, then would have been a tie, right? As I'm working through the scenario, it would have been obviously me not getting a vote, Andrew not having a vote, and then let's say it was between Simmons and Austin or Simmons and Maddie. Then by default, one of the three of them still goes. It wouldn't have been my target, but again, I think I would have said to Andrew, listen, we need to give ourselves the best chance to get to the end. And I think that's without Simmons in the Final Four. Just based off of this game and our previous game, anything can happen, but odds are he's going to win. So let's get him out when we can, and let's give ourselves the best chance to make it to the end together. Because I did want Andrew in my Final Three. I think ideally, if then it were a Final Four of myself, Andrew, Austin, and Maddie, I probably would have wanted an exile Final Three, because I feel like I didn't quite know Maddie enough within the game to know how tight a relationship she had with people on the jury. And I feel like if it was an all exile Final Three, I think it would have just been a little more of a fair shot for any of us versus us with Maddie, which to my perspective, she was a bit of a wild card, just not knowing her game quite well.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I'm sorry, Greg, that I asked your question beforehand, but I like this answer too. Next question is from Trinity Falls, Ben Horn. He asks, how would a hypothetical PA alliance do on a DCP season, mainly including himself and Garrett from Ricky?
Yeah, I would be all for that. Obviously biased, but think PAs are great. And I think just from coming from like how I approach the game, it's obviously a more kind of like analytical point of view, just really thinking things through objectively. And I think just being in the medical field, but being in that kind of PA provider role, you're always trying to just do obviously what's right for the patient and what's right medically. And it's a very technical kind of thought process. So I think obviously what goes with that is the social aspect of using that mindset and translating that to your social relationships. So I think it would be very interesting. I don't like trying to just have alliances just based off of some kind of maybe arbitrary label, but I think just in general PAs have at that kind of analytical mindset, which I think is good for a game like this. And as long as the social game kind of goes hand in hand with that, I think that would be a great alliance.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Ben, you got your answer. Man, if only we could have gotten Ben and Gary on this. We needed a bigger cast. We had so many people that could have been on this season. The next question is from Lex's mom, Sharon.
Love it.
So, hey Zucker, congrats on getting to the Final Four. I really wished that you and Maddie could have been in the Final Two together, but as we've heard now, that wasn't going to happen between you two. What was your favorite game move you did this season, and is there a game move you regret doing this season?
I would say I'm actually going to go back to probably the pre-merge on that. I'm going to go with the post-swap, the time we went to Tribal where we had the high rollers room, and, it was my idea to ideally not have anyone within our tribe go, just because, we're assuming it's, most likely if you go, you're not going to win, but if you go and lose, if it's a vote and we're only in the tribe of 5, that's a very, dangerous thing to work through. And I felt at that point, I was in good with Shea and Ashley. So we had a 3. And I felt good with Andrew, just having my previous relationship with him in our first game. And someone that, again, is on the surface viewed as maybe the outsider, but I knew wanting to build trust with him and show him he can work with me this game. So I really wanted Jeremy, obviously, as the target, and the way to ensure he might not get something is to make sure that he doesn't go. And what better way than to create as convenient as it's labeled as just another room, a low rollers room, at the same time conveniently as the high rollers room, because if we're in this group, that means we can't be in the other one. So just coming up with that idea, that plan, just to make sure that knowing where everyone was and that there wasn't anything fishy that will make that impending vote go south. That was one of the moves I feel most proud of for myself in the game.
Awesome.
And there was another question she had?
Yeah, she, like, in the counterpoint, she was like, is there a game move that you regret?
That I regret? I'll liken it back to her lovely son Lex, which is that just not going with, obviously telling him everything I knew about the code and obviously just the events that transpired, even though it ultimately got me, I was able to work with that and get as far as I did in the game. It would have been a lot, I think, easier of a road had, none of the chaos that transpired happened. So if I were to say one main regret was just kind of how those events unfolded and, just maybe the certain conversations I did or didn't have with people, just to minimize that kind of blowback.
Okay. Now we have one last question before my question. It's from someone named Amanda Goodman on Facebook.
Who's that?
Do you happen to know her?
Maybe. I think I've heard her, yeah.
Zucker, you're my favorite player this season after Coach Drew. So sorry to see you go, but hella impressed you made it to the David Wright position. Multifaceted there. Questions. Number 1. Which player in CBS Survivor history who also finished just shy of Final Tribal Council do you think you played most like this game?
Coming in with the good questions. All right. Let's see. All right. I'll try not to take too long because I'm just thinking of like all the, whether you factor in like Final 3, Final 4, just like right before like the Final Tribal. But just my first thought is actually probably like a Rob Sesternino, just someone that kind of like mimicking my game, was wanting to not be so dependent on one alliance. He pivoted. He kind of created that strategy of just being able to pivot between different alliances, different groups of people, and keeping himself kind of in the middle of all that. So I think I kind of implemented that a bit this game. And, not that I think I'm the smartest person to never win, but, if anyone has that mentality like him, I'll take it. So I would say just from a game perspective, though, I think the way we play, we're very similar.
I think it's a very astute answer. And hey, Rob Cesternino is a big reason why I started watching Survivor. So good answer. She has a couple more questions for you. Number 2, do you regret playing your idol when you did?
Yeah, no, again, I think I touched on it before. I don't, just because, the vote didn't come on me and, it can be technically viewed as an incorrect play. In that situation, with the little time I had to figure out what I wanted to do once Karen played her legacy advantage, I knew I had to ensure my safety, because if it wasn't that round, then I had to play it the next round. So I got as far as I did with holding on to it and trusting the talks I had with people. But at that point, that round, there weren't talks with people. So I had to just go with my gut, which was to make sure I made it to Final 5 and, living another round. So yeah, I don't regret playing it in that round at all.
Perfect. Number 3, if you could have played in any previous season of CBS Survivor, which do you think you would have had the best shot of winning in, and why?
It's interesting because, like, I'm going into that with like that answer with obviously having watched 44 now and counting seasons of Survivor and having obviously all the knowledge and information that I do. So it's like, in that situation, do I hop in my DeLorean, go back in time to like Survivor Borneo, where basically strategy was, except for like Richard Hatch, was like non-existent, and just steamroll to the end and win that game? So, but I think, so I guess technically I would have had the best chance to win that season, right? But I think from a just pure like enjoyment and fun and chaotic standpoint, something like a Survivor Cagayan or a Heroes versus Villains, just with such dynamic personalities and just, gameplay that is just top notch, I think I would have had the best time playing a game like that, but obviously not as good a chance to win. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of my answer to that question.
Okay.
First time player on Heroes versus Villains.
Yeah, first time player on Heroes versus Villains.
Yeah, interesting.
The DCP games are his intro game. He comes on to Heroes versus Villains. No one knows who he is, and he's placed on the Villains tribe. And he's once again one of the other players who's like, I don't think I'm on the right tribe, Jeff.
Yep.
Well, do you see these guys? I'm a doctor. I'm nice. And then she has one last question for you. Anything you want to share with your adoring fan base?
Let's see. Anything I want to share? Nah, I mean, I don't know if that's intended to be like a game related or outside the game related question, but I would say, I mean, we pretty much touched on everything major throughout the game. I'm glad we kind of touched on just the hypotheticals of what I would have wanted to have done in the final five if I had my idol. So I think that's probably like the big takeaway is just like what my like very end game thoughts were of who I wanted to be within the end. It would have been a question of in the event I did get to the final three, obviously depending on who it's with, but just my perception of, other jurors of my game within the game, how that would have translated to, their willingness or not to maybe want to vote for me. So that's an answer. I don't know if we'll ever know, but I would have liked to have thought as I'm kind of doing now, explaining why I did things and that it was all intentional, that it would have been kind of like a big realization on people like that, this is someone we want to vote for. So yeah, I didn't really answer the question, but I'm just trying to, I guess, put a cap on everything within my game and the intentions I had.
No, that's fine. Because we get to my question. And it's me again, Mr. Positivity. Tell me one positive thing you took away from your All-Stars experience.
I would say for me, I think just I'm proud of the game I played. Like, my first season, like it was a great, obviously, like introduction into the org community. But I didn't feel like I took a lot out of it, but just from like a game standpoint, I didn't feel like I didn't find any idols or advantages. I didn't win immunity. Not that that's like the be all end all, but those are great things to just take away, like surface level from the game. And so having found the idol and working hard for that and winning immunity when I did at Final Five, one of the more crucial ones at that point, those are just really proud moments for me. And I think getting as far as I did in an all-star season, I didn't quite make it to the end, but I think Final Four is not even on a non-all-star season. It's a great game to get to there, to get to that point. So, I'm just I think my biggest takeaway is just, getting all those check marks on my Survivor bucket list kind of done with, and hopefully catapulting that in any future games I play to doing that much better. So that's my big takeaway.
Awesome. Okay, Ian.
All right, you're gonna replace someone on the All Stars cast, so you have three choices. With someone from Exile Island, who you think?
Well, he technically has four.
Who you think could be an all-star and not necessarily, you're not taking away someone's all-star.
So obviously it's from who were on Exile on All Stars, taking one of them out and putting someone else in Exile.
Yes.
I would say like it's tough because I could probably pick like in a good way. I could probably pick something about like Simmons, about Austin, about Andrew that I wouldn't want them in a game with. But I think if I were to just go with just who I felt like I could work with closest within the game, I feel like I would probably take out Austin just because I didn't have as good a relationship with him in our first season. And I would replace him. It might be a bit of a surprise to people, but I'll probably say Jim. I just think I think good old Ninja Jim is just a guy who is so loyal and so just not predictable, but just someone that where his thought process is pretty much throughout the game, and it's just like a loyal Alliance member. So I would say if he were in All Stars, I would feel we could work well together. We have that previous relationship within our game, and yeah, I just that's my gut instinct is to say Jim.
Well, I'll let you in on a little secret. Jim was reached out to about All Stars, and
wow, all right.
I mean, obviously he was not on the cast, so
yeah, this is fair enough. But that would have been something to have him in the mix, right?
Yeah, Jim. Always loved Jim. I actually forgot about Survivor Ninja Jim until right now. I usually just remember the Thunderstruck part, and
can't forget that.
Yeah. Okay, and then next question is your DCP Mount Rushmore.
All right. So like I hate to say like I'm not like all knowing when it comes to like all the seasons of DCP. So, I'm probably gonna just default to kind of like obviously the season I played and then the other one that I watched. But I think I'll start with Simmons because, just from Exile, just a hell of a game he played, pretty much in all aspects. Obviously, the physical game, won 4 immunities, strategically and socially, one of the top, obviously, people within that game. So I think I would definitely start with him. I would also, I'll throw in John from that season. I think just, I had a very great alliance with him and just outside the game, he's just such a great guy, and yeah, I think just if I were to think of just DCP, I think his name is just kind of like he's just a very like domineering presence and just someone that is very representative of Exile and of DCP. So I'll go with John for my second. um I'll also say Austin just because I think you don't get to Final Three and Final Four by accident, in his first 2 seasons. So I think just that is very respectable, and the game he played is a little more low key under the radar. But that's a great way to get to the end. So I think that again those so at that point that's my three and four. I would probably say may, maybe not arguably the best gameplay, especially in Exile, but I think just out of again just a personality and someone that you just can't help but laugh with is Connor. I would say Connor just because he just brought such light to the season, just such comedic value. And then his following season in Monte Carlo, he did quite well, made it to the final three. And didn't ultimately win, but listen, no one says you have to play a great game to be on a Mount Rushmore. So I'll say those four. Just I think it's a good mix of good gameplay, maybe not so good gameplay, but just great personalities to make it the Mount Rushmore.
Cool, cool, cool. All right, well, Lilly, I'm tossing it back over to you.
All right. Well, we like to end every exit with the same question, and that is if you could sum up your game in one word, what would it be and why?
I will say my game is it's not one word, but I'll maybe say 2 words: controlled chaos. And for the reason being that obviously, on the surface, there was obviously some chaos involved with just the right after the merge happened and just the events that followed. But the way I handled it, it was obviously, I think as good as I could have. It was calm, cool, and collected. And then, everything I had kind of coming into the game with, and then following that within the merge, everything I had, like it was a reason. There was an intent behind those decisions and those moves. And once I was able to kind of again let the dust settle and pick up the pieces, I feel like I maneuvered my way quite well to the end and just fell short. But that's how it goes most times whenever we play these games. So yes, I would say in that sense, I guess my game was a little bit of controlled chaos.
We'll put a hyphen in between.
Yeah, there you go. That's good.
Okay, Ian, take us home.
All right. Well, again, I like to comment on the people I've hosted. So, in the past, hosted you obviously this time, but yeah, Zucker, you were definitely someone that I was hoping would apply for All Stars. Not, I mean, I know you're a busy guy, so not sure if you would. And then I was super happy to see your application. Um, yeah, as Alex mentioned, just something in the past game that wasn't great kind of took you out of the game, and we saw what was there, and we're happy to get it both strategically and socially this time as well. Um, but yeah, I mean, we're really closing down here on All Stars. We have, I would assume, just one Sunday show left. We have our finale coming up, and we have exits whenever they're coming out. I don't know. The schedule is going to be so messed up with 3 people in one week. Um, So yeah, I mean, whenever should be the last week, hopefully for All Stars, we should be able to get everything in and close out the season on a good note. Down to our final three of Austin, Maddie, and Simmons. So excited to see where that shakes out, how it shakes out. But as always, you can find us here on YouTube or at any of our socials, Dynamic Character Productions, and we will see you next time.